I was listening to a lecture, and I actually think I'd heard it before, but it was by Cornel West. It was on CBC. You should totally check it out. It's free. It's about 54 minutes. He was in Winnipeg, and he was prophesying and preaching, and he said, this phrase isn't very popular, but he is about as militant a Christian as you can get. And one of the things that he said, and it was just this offhand line that I don't even know if it was leading anywhere in particular, but he asked the audience, are you on a quest for pleasure or a quest for joy? And then he went on to other stuff, and I thought, that's a sermon right there. Because it's a phenomenal question for us. Are you on a quest for pleasure or are you on a quest for joy? And I think for most of us in this room, if not all of us, it's sort of a rhetorical question because I think all of us are on a quest for joy. And like I was saying to our young people, there's a big difference, I think, between joy and happiness. Joy seems to be an orientation of the heart. Joy is a source. It seems to be almost a kind of spiritual fuel tank of a kind. And we spend our lives trying to fill it. And we fill it in good times very easily. I wonder if we fill it in bad times more slowly, or to be honest, if what we would describe as the bad times when we call together all those people who love us to help us through a time of struggle, I do wonder if we fill our joy more quickly in times of grief. But we try to fill it with love. And it's really good news because when we feel great joy, we can feel joy in times of gladness and happiness and parties, and we can feel deep, deep joy in times of great tragedy and great darkness in our lives, and the joy can guide us through those desert times in our lives. But of course, there's a catch. And the catch is that to fill our lives with joy almost always seems to be a lot of work. While the quest for pleasure seems instant, right? The quest for pleasure can be summarized almost as soon as we take a seat on the couch and put the TV on. Mission accomplished. I have succeeded in my quest, and this evening is going to be great. And as soon as that TV goes off and we get up from the couch, the pleasure is gone. And the life that we abandoned a few hours ago has suddenly returned into focus once again. Whereas the quest for joy is a lot of work. Raising children, apparently, can be a lot of work, I've heard, and yet deeply joyful. I think all of our great relationships, I think there's some times where friendships come very easily and our family relationships sort of cruise along and don't seem to require a lot of work. And I think other times life can challenge us and friendships and family can be work for us. Cornel West was talking about the quest for justice, which is an enormous amount of work. It's a lot of work to try to convince our leaders sometimes to be just. And then there's other things which can be very pleasurable and really wonderful, but there's almost two different ways that we can engage in them. You think about music. Music can be something that can be an almost sacred force, that people will say, music saved my life. I would say there's some times where I've always loved some of the great classical composers, and I would say sometimes that I felt like Brahms was saving my life. And I was very mindful in those times, and I remember being very, very serious in listening to this great work of art. But music, of course, can also be something we just put on in the background to distract us from our thoughts. Times when maybe we should be living in silence or mindfully engaging in something. We got the TV on in one room, the radio's on in another. We're not really paying attention to anything, and we're just trying to escape, to find some sort of pleasure in this life, to distract ourselves from the chaos of this world. It seems that being mindful can be really powerful. One of the words in the Bible that is used a lot is sabbath, and I think that might be one of the things that word describes, is being really mindful about not doing work. I think joy can be an enormous amount of work, right? In the Bible, God recognizes it. You're going to work really, really hard if you want to follow me, but I want you to take one day a week where all you do is rest. And I wonder how many of us, I think this room is filled with do-gooders and careful people. I wonder how many of us are really good at Sabbath. Are you good at resting? I am not. I'm good at distracting myself. I'm a super good Netflix watcher. But I'm not so good at being very intentional about taking time to be at rest. So many of us have trouble falling asleep. Think about all the things that we do to try to get into a place where we can fall asleep as our minds are racing. A lot of us don't take to Sabbath well. And then there's other forces that oppose us. We're starting this course in the Old Testament, so you're going to hear all sorts of little details from me. I hope they're helpful from time to time. But there's one of the things that there's an article this week, and it talks about the pagan world and the world of the people of Israel. And I think we'd love to live in the pagan world, in a way. It'd be deeply terrifying, but we kind of would like it. In the pagan world, there are the great forces of heaven, and then there are the great forces of the devil. And there's a big army of angels, and then there's a big army of demons. And they're an internal struggle. If you play any video game with angels in it, that's exactly what the video game looks like. There's the angels on the one side and the demons on the other. They both have swords, and they clash in the middle, and they never stop fighting. That's the pagan world, right? For the God of the people of Israel, our God, the Christian God, there's no demon army at work. It's us. The word we use most often is sin. It's us. We're the ones stopping us from joy. There's something in us that seems to prevent us from seeking out those joyful things in our lives, and instead we might seek pleasure to distract ourselves or other tricks and ways. There's a reason why in the Bible, Satan is called the prince of lies. It seems to be the biggest and greatest threat to our joy is actually lying and deceit, usually lying to ourselves. We can think of every addiction in the world in a way as an elaborate lie that we tell to ourselves, and we tell to our family, and we tell to our friends, and we tell to God. Simply not telling the truth can be enormously destructive. The first time we lie, it's harmless. In fact, a lot of child psychologists note the point when a child learns to lie as a really helpful point on their journey, because they can learn to abstract language from truth. It means we're smart and clever. But a life that's overtaken by deceit can lead us down some very, very dark roads. One innocent lie after the next, and suddenly we aren't quite sure what is true anymore. In the scriptures, it's probably one of the darkest, most sinister things that threatens us, is lying and deceit. So we're all on a quest for joy. That joy is going to be a lot of work. To help us on our journey, God has insisted that we rest. We need to remember how to do that. Just study cats. And perhaps the greatest threat that faces us in a lot of ways is lying and deceit. And usually it's us. Lying to ourselves, not being honest to God, and not being honest to the people who love us and want us to be joyful. So I encourage you to live honest lives on your quest for joy. Amen.